Liz, I don't want a handout. I want an opportunity. That's what I've heard over and over for the last 10 years. I've worked with homeless and disabled individuals who don't want to be defined by their circumstance. They desperately want to work, but sometimes their challenges have prevented that. I started off doing casework, working one-on-one, helping get jobs, housing, food resources. And during those meetings, I heard over and over, also, Liz, I'm incredibly lonely. I'm incredibly overwhelmed. And that got to me emotionally. I thought, okay, well, if I keep hearing the same thing in one-on-ones, how can I figure out a way to come together and support one another? And I've been an artist my whole life, so I thought, why don't I start art groups in local shelters? That can be a way to come together and bring lonely individuals right together to support one another. So that's what I did. I switched my career from casework to running therapeutic art groups. One thing I was amazed by in those art groups was the talent, raw talent with artists like Jim. These artists were completely unseen. The artwork would end up in closets of shelters, I found out. It wasn't just the shelter where I was working, but I realized there were thousands of existing shelters all across the country. And these art groups were creating amazing artwork, but the big missing piece was a marketplace. My brother and I decided to team up to create a marketplace. We decided to call it ArtLifting, which combines the words art and uplifting. And the goal of this was to work with the thousands of existing art groups all across the country, curate the top artwork, and create an opportunity for these hidden talents. So that's what we did. We started just 3 years ago with $4,000 of our savings, and it's been a winding road from there. One of our artists, Scott Benner, has a pretty wild story. He worked as a steel worker his whole life. During the recession in 2009, he lost his job. The company where he'd been working for years shut down, and all of a sudden he was out of work. He was applying to jobs, applying to more jobs, but not having any luck. And then what happened was what he calls the perfect storm. He ended up getting Horner syndrome, which is a disease that makes you randomly dizzy and confused. So all of a sudden, he couldn't operate heavy equipment anymore. And what he dreamed of as his future job, that prospect was gone. But the perfect storm continued. His wife got cancer. All of a sudden, both he and his wife were out of work, and they had extreme medical bills to pay. Long story short, Scott went through his $200,000 in life savings, balancing out these hard times, and he ended up homeless. Scott was sleeping under the bushes in the Boston area, and then when it got cold in November, he moved into a shelter. It was tough times, certainly, but he went to his artwork as a way to cope with the stress and as a form of therapy. Every day he'd go to the library, the public library by him, and draw. For his entire life, he's created masterpieces with just a pen and a sheet of paper. For 30 years, he had been doing art therapy, sometimes on Saturdays for 8 hours straight, and creating these unbelievable masterpieces. I can't imagine having the patience to see a white sheet of paper and say, oh yeah, I can do that with a pen. But this is his true masterpiece. Scott created this piece beforehand, afterhand, over the course of 1,300 hours. So he started just with a dot in the middle and went out very, very slowly from there. It took Scott 6 years to create this. It was pretty exciting to meet Scott. He just Googled homeless artists, and ArtLifting came up. His caseworker recommended he hook up with us, so he emailed me, and we met up. Surprisingly, he had 30 years worth of artwork in his hand. It was in this big portfolio with duct tape, And we opened it up and went through it all, and I got to see a 1,300-hour-long piece. It's like, wow, you are incredible. We need to get you out there. So Scott and I worked together to make sure he got the attention he deserved. This is Scott going full circle. After Googling homeless artists, a couple years later, he was speaking at the opening of Art at Google. And he sold a bunch of artwork to the Google corporate offices. Here's Governor Deval Patrick looking at Scott's work. Scott's original hangs above Governor Patrick's office. This is the craziest of all the stories. Scott's artwork is actually sold on mattresses. A company called Lisa licensed his artwork, so it's sewn in, and it's the design right here. Here's Scott on the cover of the New York Times business section this year. Scott has sold originals for as much as $25,000. He has licensed mattress deals. But it's not just about the money. The bigger thing is about the confidence of not being defined by his circumstance of being homeless, but instead of being defined by his talent as a really amazing artist. Next, I want to tell you about a different artist. This piece, it looks like a fancy living room, but it has a lot more of a story behind it. If you zoom in, you can actually see there are tire marks on the bottom of this piece. Some artists who can't create artwork with their hands will create artwork with their head. They'll either put a paintbrush in their mouth or have a helmet with a paintbrush taped onto it. But Eric Santamaria, the artist behind this piece, can't create artwork with his hand or his head. He has cerebral palsy. So he doesn't decide to not create artwork. Instead, he creates artwork with his wheelchair. This is Eric creating his piece out in LA in a center for individuals with cerebral palsy. The art directors there go above and beyond to make anything possible. They have experts who are thinking, okay, well, if you can't grasp, could we use a tennis ball to push back and forth? Or if you can't use anything else, how can we use your wheelchair to create art? The stories of Scott and Eric go pretty deep. It's not just about out-of-the-box artwork. It's about the concept of defining people and seeing, okay, well, over the last 10 years, people keep saying to me, Liz, everyone always focuses on the negative in me, of you're homeless, you're in a wheelchair, or whatever it might be. But with ArtLifting, my brother and I decided to flip that on its head, and instead of focusing on the negative in people, focusing on the positive, of you are so talented, you created this amazing piece of art. And it's been pretty incredible to see the domino effect of all of a sudden our artists have the energy to do tons of housing applications or to get a side job at a nail salon or whatever it might be. Since starting just 3 years ago with $4,000 of our savings, revenue has bootstrapped to the 6 figures. Our program has expanded to 16 states nationwide. We've sold to 46 states and worldwide. It's been pretty exciting to see our artists finally get the dignity that they deserve. But a bigger concept that I think about, beyond ArtLifting, is the concept of JobLifting. Sure, my background was art, so that's where we started. Those are the invisible talents we decided to make visible. But how can this concept be expanded? How can it be expanded to your everyday life of thinking, well, what about my colleague? What about my friend? How am I defining them? And what are hidden talents that they have that I can pull out of them? And I also think about the concept of music lifting, or wood lifting, or food lifting. What other talents are out there, especially for individuals who suffer from chronic unemployment? Individuals who have mental health challenges or suffer from disabilities. How can we help them get their talents out there and help them contribute to the economy? Thank you so much.